In this second video, we will be briefly overviewing the functions of the urinary system and its associated organs. The urinary system is a fairly simple yet crucial organ system responsible for a variety of physiological roles in the body. It attaches directly to the circulatory system and is composed primarily of the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. Its main functions include the elimination of metabolic wastes such as urea, uric acid, regulation of ion levels such as sodium, calcium, and potassium, the regulation of acid-base balance in the blood, regulation of blood pressure by the release of renin, elimination of biologically active molecules such as hormones, toxins, and unwanted drugs, and the formation of calcitriol by synthesizing an enzyme necessary for it, production and release of erythropoietin when detecting low oxygen concentration in the blood, and the potential to engage in gluconeogenesis during periods of fasting. Simply put, the urinary system takes care of our blood. The main organ of the urinary system is the kidney. In this coronal cross-section, we will discuss the major structures to better understand the kidney's job of filtration. This dotted section represents the cortex, which is filled with many microscopic structures called nephrons. The cortex is where filtration primarily occurs, whereas the medulla is the site of reabsorption and draining of metabolic wastes. Structures that make up the medulla are called the renal pyramids. Pre-filtered blood arrives from the renal artery and branches into arterioles that reach the cortex via the renal columns. Once in the cortex, the blood in the arterioles undergoes filtration and secretion, ultimately being rid of unnecessary filtrates as well as resupplied with water and ions. The clean blood then returns via the renal vein to the rest of the body, while the metabolic waste is filtered through the renal pyramids to the calyxes, starting with the minor and major calyxes and ultimately collecting in the renal pelvis. Zooming in on the border between the cortex and medulla here, we can see a simple representation of a nephron and the structures that extend past the cortex into the medulla, namely the loop of Henle and the collecting ducts, which ultimately carry metabolic waste to the calyxes. We will be discussing these structures in detail shortly. This brings us to the physiology of the nephron. The nephron is the main functional unit of the kidney's filtration system. These structures are microscopic and they work together in the millions to filter out the blood in your body. The inside of the kidney has increased surface area owing to the small size of the nephrons and the vast capillary networks. The nephron also has important functions of reabsorbing vital components of blood that get filtered out, such as amino acids, ions, glucose, and water. The nephron is composed of a front-end capsule called Bowman's capsule, where filtration occurs, and a series of tubules that traverse both the cortex and medulla, where secretion, reabsorption, and excretion occurs. Tubules from a multitude of nephrons end at the collecting ducts, which serve to drain the waste products and excess water. The nephron can be further grouped into a front-end renal corpuscle and a back-end renal tubule. Pre-filtered blood enters the Bowman's capsule from the afferent arteriole and travels through a complex capillary network within the capsule called the glomerulus. Due to hydrostatic pressure, as blood travels through the glomerulus, many components filter out, including water, amino acids, toxins, urea, and ions. Blood leaves the glomerulus through the efferent arteriole and joins the capillary network in the surrounding tissues, where parts of the proximal and distal convoluted tubules regulate and diffuse components back into the bloodstream. As the filtrate passes through the proximal convoluted tubule, the surrounding blood vessels secrete uric acid, while also reabsorbing water, ions, and amino acids. The filtrate then moves on to the descending limb of the loop of Henle, where water leaves the tubule to be reabsorbed due to an osmotic concentration gradient. In the ascending limb, sodium and chloride ions also leave the tubule. The relatively high concentration of sodium surrounding the loop of Henle is crucial for the reabsorption of water, since this osmotic pressure is what protects the body from dehydration during kidney filtration. In the distal convoluted tubule, the kidneys selectively secrete various ions back into the tubules depending on the necessary properties to be balanced. Ultimately, waste products are excreted into the collecting ducts. Final excretion in the collecting ducts is a composition of urea, uric acid, water, bicarbonate, as well as other metabolic wastes and undesired toxins. It is important to remember that during this final stage of filtration, the collecting ducts also perform last-minute tweaking of electrolyte and fluid balance via the reabsorption of hydrogen and bicarbonate ions as well as water, a process regulated by the hormones aldosterone and vasopressin. The collecting ducts drain any undesired remaining filtrate through the renal pyramids to the minor and major calyxes as mentioned before. From the calyxes, what would now be considered urine gets carried to the ureters. Urine then drains through the ureters to the urinary bladder, where it collects and awaits final excretion through the urethra. And that is the urinary system in a nutshell, a complicated nutshell.